Hey guys, thanks for joining me as we continue to chase Jesus in the Gospel of Mark. And we're going to pick up this week in Mark chapter 5. And I almost wish that the chapter division would have gone back just one story, because the end of chapter 4, if you recall, was Jesus performing the miracle of calming the sea. And in my mind, Mark is making this case for Jesus' identity, and it really started there. Think about the question that the disciples asked once Jesus had spoken to the sea and the wind and the waves obeyed him. They asked the question, who is this? And I believe that Mark is continuing to answer that question, to make a case for who Jesus is. And so we're going to see that in the rest of chapter 5. Power and authority over nature, the demonic forces, illness, uncleanness, and death. These are all the ways that Mark is describing Jesus as being all-powerful and showing that he has this tremendous authority. Chapter 5, verses 1 to 20, we find Jesus on that other side of the sea, the other side of the lake, the place where he was going with his disciples. And this is called the country of the Gerasenes. This is a place where many Gentiles live, okay? And he's only here for one day, because verses 2 through 7 will describe this man coming to Jesus. He is described as a man of the tombs. He's a man with an unclean spirit. He lives in a place of death. He lives in a cemetery, basically. And if you know anything about the Jewish law, their understanding of what happened to a person ritually, spiritually, when they were around death, they became unclean. And so this man lives in a place that is unclean. So that tells us a little bit about him. And then, of course, the fact that he is demon-possessed and demon-oppressed. So we hear descriptions like this. People had tried to shackle him, and yet he, with almost unhuman strength, was able to break free. So you get this sense of a wild man running around with chains hanging off of him. And then this description that night and day he cried out and would cut himself with stones. So he's self-inflicting harm at the guidance of these oppressive demons. Now when Jesus comes from the other side of the lake, and we get the sense that this man sees him and runs at him. And so the action begins right away. He sees Jesus, he runs to him, he falls before him, and here's the question. What do you have to do with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? Don't torment me. So this is not necessarily the voice of the man, it's the voice of the demonic oppression that's living in him, interacting with Jesus. They, of course, continue to recognize who Jesus is, and they fear him. They know that he can take them out if he wants to. So they almost ask him for mercy. Isn't that strange to see? Oh, Jesus, please don't torment us. And so Jesus will say here, sorry about the wind. No, he didn't say that. I'm saying that. Jesus will say, come out of the man, you unclean spirit. What is your name? Just in hearing the name, Jesus will show his power over these unclean spirits, these demons. And so the answer, my name is Legion, for we are many. Now this is a chilling answer, because it lets us know that this man is not just possessed by one demon, he's possessed by a legion of demons. So if it's anything like where we get the word legion from, this was a military term for Roman soldiers. This was a unit of 4,000 to 6,000 Roman soldiers. That was a legion. So it's not necessarily giving the number of the demons that are living inside of this man, but it's telling us that a lot of demons are living here. They are legion, for they are many. And they will beg him not to just cut them loose into the countryside, or I guess to send him to hell. That's where they're begging for mercy, not to be sent there. So they beg him, strangely enough, to be sent into a herd of pigs. And so there's apparently these pigs on this hillside nearby. And so Jesus will allow them to be sent into these animals. And it's a weird part of the gospel. I get that. He sends them into these animals, and apparently this crowd of 2,000 pigs kind of rumbles and stumbles down the hill, goes out into the water where they drown. A lot of questions about demons, things I don't understand, things that I bet you don't understand, but you wonder about. Can they be disembodied? Can they live outside of a human? Is it weird that they would possess an animal? And then they went and killed themselves? So was that their like desire? It's a weird thing, and we don't have a whole lot of answers. The point is to show that Jesus has power over them, and that by taking them out of this man and sending Legion away, he has liberated this man. They talk about this man as soon as those demons are sent away as sitting there cleaned up and clothed. So it kind of indicates that maybe he was even running around the tombs naked. He is sitting there in his right mind. It's like Jesus has restored him. He has brought that shalom wholeness. He has brought the peace that the winds and the waves had. Now this man has. The community didn't have peace, though, especially those pig farmers, because when Jesus had sent those pigs down the hill to their watery grave, these people were mad because that was their property. Okay, so a lot of bacon went into the water that day and wasn't going to come back out. And I don't know, BLTs are probably bad for you anyway, but they're really bad for you when they're demonic BLTs, let's be honest, right? Oh yeah, that was dumb. All right, we'll keep going here. So they begged Jesus to leave. They begged him. So the demons begged, oh please, have mercy on us. Then these people begged, Jesus, go away. It's interesting to see the begging happening in this chapter. All right, let's keep moving forward. So the demon-possessed man sitting there, now free and clothed and in his right mind. And it's such a vivid contrast of what he was before over against what he is now. And I wonder if Mark is setting up this paradigm where to come to know Jesus is to be changed, and to come out on the other side is a different person. Has that happened for you? Has it happened for me? Do we have a before and an after? It's worth thinking about. Verse 18, kind of coming to the end of this portion of this story, this young man will follow Jesus to his boat, and again, he will beg Jesus, please let me go with you. And Jesus will say, no, you can't go with me. It's one of those places where it's kind of weird. Everybody else, Jesus wants them to follow him and leave everything behind and follow. And here, Jesus says, no, you can't go with me. You can't follow me in this way. In fact, what I want you to do is to go to your family and your friends and tell them how much the Lord has done for you and how he has shown mercy to you. So did you hear what he said? Go tell everybody what the Lord has done for you. So then Mark says, he went away and he began to proclaim how much Jesus had done for him. Jesus said, what now? Go tell people what the Lord has done for you. And he went away and said, I got to tell you how much Jesus has done for me. This man believed Jesus to be Lord. Mark wants us to believe that Jesus is Lord. Do you believe it? He identifies Jesus with God. That is part of the point of his gospel, right? All right, so the next portion of chapter 5 of the Gospel of Mark is what is called a sandwich story. I guess I got this on my mind with the BLT, but it's a sandwich story. It has kind of this beginning that involves this man Jairus coming to Jesus. Then we'll get kind of the meat of the story with Jesus interacting with this woman, and then it'll come back at the end, back to Jairus and his little girl, okay? So the first part is Jairus. He is a leader of the synagogue, a ruler of the synagogue. So he's like a church leader. He's like an elder or a pastor, okay? And he's Jewish, obviously, and he has come to Jesus as he's come back into town. He's come to Jesus because he believes that he can help him. He comes to him and he falls at Jesus' feet, again begging or imploring him, "My little daughter is at the point of death. Come and lay hands on her so she will be made well and live." So begging Jesus to come and heal his little girl who is on the verge of death. And this is where then Jesus begins to move toward Jairus' house and toward that little girl. But we move into the next part of the story, because as the crowd is moving through the town, Jesus will be interrupted. Okay, so all this activity around him and the crowds pressing in and the disciples trying to control all of this, and we meet another woman. Mark tells us that she had had 12 years of discharge, that she had suffered much, that she had spent all the money she had, and that she was no better. If anything, she was actually worse than where she started out. So this bleeding, this perpetual bleeding for her, had caused her to be a social outcast, a spiritual outcast, and basically to be living like a hermit, because she couldn't go around people. Ritually unclean because of the flow of blood. She couldn't worship in the synagogue. She couldn't be around family. She really could not be around people because her uncleanness was in a way contagious. She made other people around her sick or unclean. Okay? Now the whole thought of this comes from places like Leviticus 15, places in the law that dealt with feminine issues, menstruation, childbirth, all these things that really, because of blood, made a person unclean. So if you want to go and look that up, that's what's going on. That's what makes her such an outcast to society. And really, she shouldn't be in this crowd, because the same notion of her not going to synagogue or going to a family reunion is this notion that everybody she touches, she's making them unclean, and they don't even know it. Okay, so she shouldn't be here, but she sort of worms her way through the crowd because she wants to get to Jesus. There's this pattern here that she has heard about him, she has believed that he could help her, and then she comes to him. Heard about him, believed, came to him. You think Mark wants us to follow that pattern? I think he does. So she comes up to Jesus, finds her way through the crowd, doesn't want to touch him, just reaches out by faith and touches the hem of his garment, the corner of his little robe that's flowing along with him in this crowd. And of course, she expects that she'll touch him, whatever will happen, and then she can slip away and no one will even know she was there. But it's not what happens. Instead, she touches him and she experiences healing. She is healed in that moment. And Jesus, Mark tells us that he recognizes that power is gone out from him. What does that feel like? I have no idea. I don't know if it's like being around a bunch of extroverts, you know, and you just sucked of my life. I don't know what it was like for Jesus, but he felt power go out from him as she was healed by him. And so he stops this great crowd of people moving and the disciples moving with him, and he asks the question, who touched me? And of course the disciples, well, a lot of people are touching you. There's all kinds of people, but she knows what's up. So she comes back to him. She came in fear and trembling, and she fell before him. And you get the sense that she's expecting that he is going to rebuke her, that he's going to tell everybody what's going on with her, and he's going to say, look at what she's done to us, we're all unclean now, go home, get out. That's what she's expecting, I would think, from the rabbi, the holy man who she has touched and potentially rendered unclean. And yet he says to her these words, daughter, your faith has made you well, go in peace. and be healed of your disease. It's like the wind knows when the really amazing things are being said by Jesus. Go in peace. Be healed of your disease. So this is wonderful. We're going to talk a little bit more about this interaction because we get now to the other side of the sandwich. As Jesus is having this discussion with this woman, speaking to her, sending her away healed and at peace, well, a servant comes to Jairus, that pastor, and he says, don't trouble the rabbi anymore. Let's head home now. Your daughter has died. As if to say, the moment has passed, he was too late, and he can't do anything about it now. Well, that's all wrong. Mark says that Jesus overheard and said to Jairus, do not fear, only believe. Do not fear, only believe. Now, again, if you go back into chapter 4 and you see Jesus waking up from his nap, the storm on the sea, what did he say to the disciples? He said, do not fear, have faith. Here he says to Jairus, do not fear, only believe. And here's what happens. The crowd moves along to Jairus' house, and he decides to go in. He takes, for whatever reason, 3 disciples, Peter, James, and John. Now we'll see this threesome again in other places where Jesus wants them to see some very important things that he'll do, or certain things about himself. We'll get to some of that even later in the Gospel of Mark. But here he takes just those 3, and then he invites Jairus and his wife, Mrs. Jairus, to come with him as they go in to see the little girl. Well, getting into the house, there's such a commotion because all these people are around weeping and wailing, and it's obviously this really sad scene because the little girl has died. And Jesus will say to them, why are you making a commotion and weeping? The child is not dead, but sleeping. And they will laugh at him, which laughing at Jesus is usually not a very good idea, but they laugh at him because they think he's a fool, or they think he is stupid, and he's not either. So they enter into the house, they go up to the room where the little girl is, and it's this incredible scene where Jesus enters the room and comes into the presence of this little dead child. So again, the man of the tombs, unclean, he lives in a place of death. The woman with her issue of blood, cut off from community and spirituality, dead in a different way, a walking kind of death. She can't be around people. And now Jesus interacting with this dead child, physically dead child. What will happen? Mark describes something that I find to be very important, is that he comes over to the little girl, he sits down next to her bed, and he takes her hand. You see, the man of the tombs, being around other people, he would make them unclean. The woman with the issue of blood, being around other people, would make them unclean. A dead body being touched, even for burial or a funeral, makes people unclean. But this is not the way it works with Jesus. He is able to overcome death and uncleanness, just like he was able to overcome the demonic oppression and the disease. He is stronger. So he is not rendered unclean. He renders clean. Do you see the difference? He's powerful. He is more than a man here. It's part of what Mark wants us to see. And we see it here in this quiet moment where he sits down and he takes the hand of the little dead child. And he says to her, Talitha Kumi, which Mark translates for his audience who doesn't speak household Aramaic. He translates for them, little girl, I say to you, arise. So with the tenderness of a parent going in to wake a child up for school, come on, it's time to get up for the day, Jesus speaks to the little dead girl. And immediately she got up and walked. Now, I don't know exactly what the connection is, but this is the place where Mark wants us to see that she was apparently 12 years old. Now, it's interesting because the woman with the issue of blood had had that issue for 12 years. I don't know exactly what the connection is, but you've got two women in the same sandwich story, 12 years. It's worth thinking about and considering. What is God trying to show us, other than that Jesus is one to reach out to women? Okay? So, all are immediately overcome with amazement. I obviously believe that means the little girl, her mom and dad that would have had to have been overjoyed that their dead child is now alive, the disciples who have not seen Jesus raise anyone from the dead, the mourners and wailers outside that said Jesus was a fool, all of a sudden see the little girl coming down to get a bowl of peanut butter crunch because Jesus said that she needed to go get something to eat. It's probably like there's a lot going on, and there's a lot of reason to be amazed in this moment. And Mark wants us to be amazed at Jesus. This is incredible what he is showing us. He is showing Jesus has authority over the impossible. Do you see that? Anything demonic, anything of nature or creation, sickness, uncleanness, even death. Jesus has authority over the impossible. This is so important for us to know from the gospel and to know in our own lives. Christ renders death as harmless as sleep for those who believe in him. Do you recognize that? Jesus makes it that even death is like taking a power nap. It's not the end. Death is the thing that almost everybody I know is afraid of. And Jesus makes it into a little nap. So even in the face of death, my friends, do not fear, only believe. Isn't Jesus amazing? I hope you enjoy Mark chapter 5. A couple weeks here, I'll see you again for Mark chapter 6. Keep tracking, okay? Go back through and watch the videos if you want to refresh on these early chapters of the Gospel of Mark. And if not, I'll see you online. Jason at thresholdchurchonline.com if you have any questions or feedback, or if you just want to let me know that you are chasing after Jesus with me, or thresholdchurchonline.com, where we have our virtual worship service for the time being, where you can come and be with us in a way, okay? Love to see you there, all right? Have a great day. Love you all.